disastrous.
Something I've learned from the entrepreneurs, you have to know your purpose. One of the first times we went around the room and said our purpose, I was like, oh, I better make something up. But now I actually know my purpose, which is to help people contribute. We will solve all of the world's problems when everyone is able to contribute their talents. There's plenty of brains and talent and art and everything to go around on the planet. But right now, who gets to contribute is a small fraction.
This is Elizabeth McNaughton. Welcome to Disrupting Disasters, conversations with disaster experts about how we can do disasters differently. For this episode, I was so stoked to talk to my friend, Dr. Carrie Santos. She's currently based in Poland, working for the American Red Cross and supporting the National Red Cross societies impacted by the Ukraine war. She has this huge humanitarian background that I've always been in awe of. I learned so much from her, and she was also the CEO of EO Entrepreneurs Organization, supporting 14,000 entrepreneurs through tough times such as COVID. It's this depth of a humanitarian career with this entrepreneurial piece that makes Dr. Carrie Santos really unique and really interesting to talk to, because it's a combination of these skills and mindsets that's going to really help us to figure out life on the climate frontier. So let's get into it.
From life behind the Iron Curtain to leading refugee work at the State Department to being a leader in the Red Cross movement, working disasters all over the world, to the CEO of EO, the Entrepreneurs Organization, and now working with the Red Cross in Ukraine. This is Carrie Santos, and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I feel very welcome.
Well, for this podcast, and the first time I actually looked you up, you also have degrees from Princeton University, a PhD from UC Berkeley, along with a Fulbright scholarship. Dan, Carrie, that's impressive.
But you outed me. I actually have spent most of my life hiding that, and I'm learning now not to, so thank you.
So good. Diplomacy in disasters. It's not always easy and not well understood. And you've had a front row seat. So I'm really interested what you've learnt and how we can get our collective groove on better.
Absolutely. Working collectively. And people like to say, it's the proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go further, go together. But that is so hard to do. Everybody loves to say it. Nobody loves to do it because you actually have to listen. I was thinking a lot about diplomacy, and it means listening, and listening with authenticity, like actually caring what the other person says.
Yeah. When I'm going into a disaster situation, I think in my head, I'm entering someone's living room, and how would I behave if I was entering someone else's house, someone else's living room? And thinking of it that way has really helped.
Because then they're a person. If you're going to somebody's house and you're at their dinner, you're probably not going to sit there like, oh, I hate this person. You're actually going to be looking for a way to connect. You want to be there. You want to enjoy. People sometimes ask me for my networking tips. I'm like, well, the trick is to like the person you're sitting across from, to build a connection, not to network with people you don't like. And then to get to that point where you can see something you enjoy about everybody. It sets the right feeling that we're people and we're meant to connect.
Yes. And it's also not about us and our ego improving ourselves, right? It's much more low key. I am a guest. I understand or try to understand the social norms. Mindsets are so important in this work. And the last few years, I've been hanging out with a lot of entrepreneurs. And so then I've been thinking, within emergency management, we have a lot of people who are quite compliance-driven or quite bureaucratic. And these skills are valuable, 100%. But we're on the climate frontier. How we did things in the past is no longer fit for purpose. We need some of these entrepreneurial mindsets and tools to help us find our way now. As the CEO of EO with 14,000 members all over the world, you've supersized your hanging out with entrepreneurs.
Yes, 24/7, really. But I learned so much. On the mindset one, it was a little interesting going through coronavirus with the Entrepreneurs Organization, because I was a little bit like, oh, this is my wheelhouse. I know how to deal with this stuff. We're going to have our daily updates and we're going to keep our knowledge over here. And there were absolutely some things I brought to them, but they brought to me a mindset that I had not encountered. It was a complete and utter lack of fear. Now, okay, not everybody in every circumstance, but there was a lot of, oh, well, my business crashed in this year and this year, 9/11, 2008, I've been bankrupted. And I go, it's just another one. It was just like, this is a normal thing. We bounce back. And the optimism where, the rest of the world is in utter panic. And I had quite a few entrepreneurs around me who were just buoyant. And I was really stunned because I think we would be kind of business-like, right? Okay, we'll just go through the checklist. But they were like, yeah, it's okay. We've done it before. That was really refreshing. And then in terms of solving the world's biggest problems, we have been running a Global Student Entrepreneur Awards program. And it was based for university students who already had a business. I would say 90% of the students who would advance up the levels from country to regional were all working on something related to sustainability and climate. And the coolest things you could never think of, I can't even describe most of them because they were so off the wall, but the kids' ideas and how they're bringing just such ingenuity to this global climate crisis and sustainability of resources, there's no doubt that when you take a young entrepreneur, they will just think of things to dazzle us. I'm always amazed.
I love that word, dazzle. What I see a lot in our humanitarian work and our disaster work, we can find ourselves in a spot where we start to wear this cloak of cynicism. We don't even realize that it's come onto our shoulders and that we're actually wearing it. And when that happens, we often say no to things because we're protecting ourselves, because it's a hard system. Disasters are hard. Conflict is hard. We're protecting ourselves from that disappointment. That means it becomes the flavor of our interactions with people, and we don't even see it, and we lose our dazzle, or we can lose our openness to ideas.
Yes. I think anyone will be able to identify with the experience on either side, that we have a volunteer and they come in with all these ideas, and the role of a humanitarian professional is to say, no, we don't do that. No, I've been doing this for 30 years. I mean, it's always that one. I've been doing this for X number of years that really takes me into a tailspin. And every crisis is different. Every crisis is different. And so no matter what you've been doing for 30 years and no matter how good your checklist is, I always stay really interested in, okay, what are going to be the things that surprise us in this crisis? What are the things we're not prepared for? And if you only have people who know the playbook and you're not open to who else is out there who's got other solutions, why not destroy another human spirit, the souls who come and want to contribute?
With you, Carrie, you've got spirit. You've got loads of it. And how do you keep it alive? How do you bring in that entrepreneurial mindset into what you do?
I absolutely get my energy from other people. So that helps. So for me to say, go into this room, make new friends, get some new ideas, that absolutely keeps me going, because I will make new friends in a room and I will get new ideas. Trying to be yourself is very hard. We get so many signals that leaders are supposed to be this or they're supposed to be that. And certainly at different points in my life, I think I felt pulled, or you said cloak, but there's also like an armor that we're taught to put on. And I think if I had chosen roles where it was always about developing more armor, I don't know who I would be. Luckily, I've been in positions where there were opportunities to be more myself. I was invited to be appreciated if I was sharing more of myself, and not everybody gets that opportunity. I'm not sure who I would have been if it was a hierarchical climb to the top, if my success was being driven by how much more buttoned up I could be. I can imagine that universe. It doesn't sound very nice.
And it's also not easy being a woman in leadership in this sector.
Please tell me the sector where it's okay to be a woman leader. I haven't found it yet, but
part of it is wayfinding. Part of it is just hard. Through the years, have you found a way to stand in your power and to really be yourself?
It's a struggle. I'm not going to tell you, oh, I figured it out. I still can feel really flattened or floored. I remember there was a moment early after I was named CEO of Entrepreneurs Organization where a male staff member said to me about the previous CEO, who was a man, "Oh, you always knew when he walked into the room that he was the CEO." And there was no way I could take that information and not interpret it as a criticism of me. And perhaps it wasn't, perhaps it wasn't, but he just really wanted to share that whenever this person walked into the room, everybody knew. And they turned and I was like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm still carrying that around years later. And those expectations of what a leader looks like, I think are very, very hard. I feel like my particular strengths are a lot about listening, a lot about bringing people together, facilitating, not standing in the front of the room. Oh, I'm a leader. And I struggle with that. I've been hoping to find those opportunities where that's what is needed. And that's what can be appreciated for a certain amount of time. But it disappoints some people. That's hard to live with. I've certainly had some good coaches. I totally believe in executive coaching. And if you think you can't afford one, there are executive coaches out there who need free hours to get their certificate. So I have used free executive coaches for sure. And I think it helps to have someone where you say these things out loud, even to be able to say, maybe that statement wasn't about me. By getting to share your story with someone else and realize, well, yes, it hurt me, but maybe there's something else there. But it's still a struggle for sure.
To your comment about the armor, I found when I lean into the parts of me that are playful, soft, I love a good laugh, all of the things that kind of delight me, when I embrace those things, I feel more powerful, less wobbly, more able to tackle whatever. It took years to get to that point. Like, I'm 44 and I'm loving the shit out of it. It's a wonderful place, I think, to arrive. And of course, still get the wobbles on. The other thing is, especially in large disasters, there's a big power play around often money, politics, visibility. Once I understood all of the forces at play, I could take the moments where I lost much better, not personally. Yeah. Before I'd been like, oh, I didn't do enough, or if I'd advocated better, we would have got that grant funding, we would have made this happen. But now I understand the bigger game at play. They're a lot easier on myself. What have been your experiences on that?
I do think that when you are tapping into yourself, like you were saying, things that give you delight, you light up and you bring an energy that isn't usually there, then you attract people with that energy who are interested. You don't attract the people who want to play in a different playing field, but they can see who you are and people come. I had an opportunity early on at Entrepreneurs Organization to give a speech. I love public speaking and I have all these notes and I write it all out and it's really good and it's thoughtful. And for this particular speech, I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't even know I was giving a keynote speech. I had maybe the night before and I wrote down some bullets. The event was about being bold. And I tried to think of what would be hard for me to do, what would be bold. And I really dug in deep and I shared a story I'd never shared with anybody to a room of 100 strangers. I think everybody in that room is still my friend today because I was really myself. I was honest. I wasn't, making a game of, oh, I've never told you. Like, I was really scared. In fact, my hand was shaking. And somebody said later, that was really awesome that your hand was shaking, that we knew you really cared and you were being yourself, especially in this weird influencers world and thought leaders and people want to be keynote speakers. It's very canned. It's very rehearsed. And I get it. It's good to be rehearsed and practiced. But sometimes what you can get by really stripping that away and just trying to speak without having memorized. It was a magical moment for me. I felt like I was flying on a trapeze without a net. And I flew in a way you never get to fly if you got the ropes on and you've got 5 people under you. It was really a life-changing experience.
Actually, this disaster work often feels like being on a trapeze and flying without a net. Within that, there's the opportunity to really grow from the adversity. How do you think it's shaped you?
Maybe I've grown maybe in being more committed to my values because we don't have anything else, right? We don't have the checklist and the hierarchy and the armor. Those are not going to serve you. Being more aware of who you are. I mean, that is, again, something I've learned from the entrepreneurs. You have to know your purpose. One of the first times we went around the room and said our purpose, I was like, oh, I better make something up. But now I actually know my purpose, which is to help people contribute. We will solve all of the world's problems when everyone is able to contribute their talents. And I really, really feel strongly. It took a while. It took me a long time to get there. And I use that lens now. Is there an opportunity here for me to help more people contribute? Because I'm sure we will solve climate change when every person who has a scientific brain gets the schooling, gets fed, doesn't have to take care of everybody else in their family. There's plenty of brains and talent and art and everything to go around on the planet. But right now, who gets to contribute is a small fraction. So having that opportunity to really find the thread, that's a thread that I can see in myself from like the age of 18. I can see that thread. And I know that I'm on my right path where I'm helping more people contribute.
I think we underestimate the power of little things and the power when we all give something, when we all contribute, when we all work towards our talent, we can achieve extraordinary things. And we've both had the privilege of seeing that play out so many times. I love that so much. And thinking about when you were 18, Carrie, and I don't get to ask this question, so it's fun. So, Carrie, when you lived behind the Iron Curtain, tell us about that and what you learned from that experience so young. Like, wow.
Truly, the first country I visited after Canada was the Soviet Union. And my mom still talks about it. Like, how did I let my daughter go to the Soviet Union? I had decided to be a Russian studies major. I was learning Russian, but you couldn't go to the Soviet Union with the US passport unless you went on a language program. 3 years into my language program, taking all Russian classes at university. So history, economics, politics, art, literature. I finally get to go to the Soviet Union. And I still remember vividly the bus we took from the train station in Leningrad, because it was called Leningrad then, to our dorm. And I was just looking out the window and like my jaw dropped and I said, nobody prepared me for this. Leningrad was the second city and all the money went to Moscow. And so where we were coming in outside of the center of town, there was a beautiful historic building, still basically not repaired from World War II. And this was multiple decades later, really in a shape of disrepair. And I don't know the story behind it. There might have been a really good reason, but basically I discovered in Leningrad, they fixed the main street, Nevsky Prospect, and just a little bit around it, but they didn't make the investment to fix all the other buildings because there were other things they were focused on. And I think that disparity I felt all summer being in a superpower, yet going into middle-class apartments that housing was really substandard, different ways that people, their quality of life was very low. And that just really hadn't been conveyed to me. Clearly they had resources. It's not that they were poor. It was where the money was going, how it was allocated. And I wrote like 8 or 9 journals that summer. And I don't even like writing journals. I've never written that many before or since, but my brain just could not believe what I was seeing every day. The difference between the book and my experience was huge. And it was like that lesson that you have to see it yourself. Always those preconditions we come in with are wrong. I mean, again and again, that's happened to me where Kenya, I knew really well from Red Cross. It was my first visit in entrepreneurs organizations. I'm like, oh, great. I know Kenya. This is going to be wonderful. I've been here so many times. And all the people I met in EO were nobody like the people I'd ever met in the Red Cross. They were completely different. Especially they were almost all Gujarati Indians. Like, okay, what is this? Why are Gujarati Indians here? Oh, we've been here 120 years. Like they're just the things that you can learn by paying attention. And every time you think you know something, you don't. I mean, that I was just blown away arriving in the Soviet Union and understanding that they lived in quite a different way than I was used to in kind of my capitalist, consumerist, middle class upbringing.
And I think that is such a superpower. Imagine if we all tested our preconceived ideas in that way and held our ideas a little more loosely. Our world really needs that right now.
Well, and being wrong, I mean, it's not that I wanted to hold them loosely. I wanted to think I was an expert. And it's like, oh, when you're wrong regularly, you're like, okay, maybe I need to learn something from this being wrong. I think I know this. In fact, I don't.
Yeah, that's a powerful, powerful lesson. And when you were talking about the buildings and the not being repaired and decades later, leads me to think about Ukraine. When I see the footage, recovery is where my mind always goes to. Just the decades and the money and the time and the energy and the sweat to rebuild every single thing that is damaged and broken. And it feels overwhelming. And so you're now supporting the Red Cross in Ukraine. Tell us a little bit about that and what do we need to know?
It's interesting. I get to work with all the Red Crosses, Ukraine, and then all the bordering ones. Poland, the Baltics, Romania, Moldova, all these countries. So it's nice having all the comparisons. But I live in Warsaw, which people may not know was 90% destroyed in World War II. Dresden is kind of the name that comes to the top of one of the most destroyed cities in Europe. But Warsaw was flattened. There's photograph after photograph of my block. Every block you can see where it's just rubble. And I do think of that all the time because it's right here. You can actually pick out any building that wasn't destroyed because it looks different. So I do bring a kind of optimism that it looked completely bleak for the Polish people and impossible. And at different times, Poland didn't exist. It was wiped off the map multiple times in history, 150 years where there wasn't a Poland. So I always feel like, hold on. Hold on. If you hold on, you will get it back. And the effort that people put in, average people, into rebuilding Warsaw, I know people can do it. So I try to actually share that story with my Ukrainian colleagues that it's different points where they may or may not want to hear that. But it's very striking where I am based in Warsaw and I work for American Red Cross and my remit is to stay this side of the war zone, but having colleagues there with bombs coming in different days, they all have family in different regions. It's really hard, but I think one of our jobs is to witness and experience and be part of what they're going through and just being open and, again, listening. When we all meet in Romania and then your Ukrainian colleagues go back to Kyiv, it's a terrible feeling, but I think holding on to the terrible feeling is part of the role.
I so agree. And it's a tricky balance, how to hold both the pain of the situation and the hope or the possibility for the future. What lessons from humanitarian diplomacy do you have to share?
I'm not sure the phrase is right.
I've been calling it disaster diplomacy down under, but yeah, I gave it a new name.
Something that I heard a lot more in the business world is storytelling. It's maybe too cute and too light, and humanitarian diplomacy is too heavy. But I do think, and there's probably all kinds of good psychology to show, humans have been telling stories forever around the fire. And if you can't take what you're advocating for and turn it into a story, a narrative that's simple to repeat, it's not going to succeed. I felt really lucky in my role at Entrepreneurs Organization. I was doing a lot of change, but I spoke to a lot of our members. And what I did was I would just try out my messages. I didn't even realize I was doing this. I figured it out after a few years. I would try out my messages. And if their eyes lit up, I would hold on to that phrase and use it again. Having a narrative that people respond to, that resonates, they can understand is so critical. There's so much complexifying in our world. I don't even think it's a word, but you know what I mean. I do love them dearly, but there are complexifiers. And you got to be careful where you put those complexifiers, because you can end up with a spreadsheet. And I have seen them 80 columns across, 200 rows down. Nobody can actually use that spreadsheet. So finding the simple thread is really difficult. It's much easier to build a super huge spreadsheet, put everybody's idea on it and say you're done. Turning that into a narrative, I think, is much harder. But really the only way you can rally people behind your cause, that people can join, they can understand, and then you can maybe bring a few more people in influence after that.
I'm going to look at people's eyes for the sparking moment.
Yeah, when you're pitching disastrous, when they go like that, oh, okay, I'm going to keep using that line again.
A lot of people don't realize that actually sales is a really important part of humanitarian work.
Yes. I think they would bristle. I mean, what you've said is pretty bold, but I can tell you from entrepreneurism, sales is a huge part, and it makes sense that you would need that perspective and everything else.
Yeah, because becoming an entrepreneur, that was the hardest piece of it for me. But then I realized, okay, well, we need to find that thread, create the message, and really sell people on humanitarian concepts. We need to sell them on these really important values. Embrace that a little bit, because that's what we are doing. So let's get better at it.
Yes. And I think with you have a business with a purpose. So I hope that helps you when you're selling. You're not selling because you want to buy a Maserati. You're selling because you're trying to help more people. And usually that kind of thing helps me a lot more in terms of promoting.
If you could go back in time to the beginning of your career and give starting out Carrie some advice, what would it be?
Less self-doubt. One way of coping with the uncertainty of the world and the, precariousness of our positions is to blame yourself. Like, oh, if I had done this, or if I had done that, or I should do this, and why am I not that? And I think it's actually a distraction. I mean, and it's much easier to say that than to just say, oh, okay, I'm not going to doubt myself. But I think it's kind of a way to focus and imagine you have control by thinking, if I had fixed these 4 things about me, then this and that, but we don't have control, and probably changing 2 or 3 things isn't going to make a difference. So when I'm criticizing myself, which I certainly was prone to in my younger days and much less now, I think it's just a way to eat up your energy, as opposed to focusing on something else that would serve you and serve others better.
Yeah, we can be so mean to ourselves. It does eat up a lot of energy that we then don't have for other things.
Right. And certainly I can speak for myself as a woman, a little bit socialized to blame ourselves and think that we're less than. So in any situation, it's like, oh, well, then what did I do wrong? Well, yes, but there could be some other ways to look at the situation besides the laser-like focus on every single thing I did wrong.
What keeps you up at night, Carrie, in this world that feels very unsettled at the moment? What keeps you up at night?
It would be easy to say war, but I think what's more honest for me is gender disparity, because I have 2 daughters. And when I gave birth now more than 2 decades ago. They're both over 20. I never imagined that they would be facing so many of the same things I face. We sort of assume a lot of progress, and that 20-year span, I just assumed all of these things would be better for them. And I'm horrified and befuddled and overwhelmed that it's not. And I don't really know what else to do about it except to keep talking about it. That's the inequality that I'm aware of because it's my experience and my daughter's. But obviously, there's lots of other situations where we would have expected more social progress.
Yes. My mum is horrified that it wasn't easier and better or completely different for me. I feel that. I really feel that. How do you use your experience with everything that you've seen in this humanitarian world to guide them?
Well, they're very good at guiding themselves. They teach me so much. My older daughter, I think she's been meditating every day since she was 13. I mean, she's just a wonder. But honestly, I think it's talking about the struggle of life because so much of what is fed to them is that life is this upward escalator. You just get on and up you go. And so what I really try to do is to talk to them about when things are not going well personally, so that they don't have to believe that there's this myth that they have to uphold and put all this energy into everything constantly gets better. You find out who you are when something is going badly. Every time my daughters have had a teacher who was unfair, I said, great, this is exactly what life is like. Wait till you get that bad boss. Now that you're being trained for some real life experience, because I promise you, you're going to have an unfair boss. And now you know. So I try to lean in a little bit more to that other narrative about not to expect just this, oh, I'm another year older and now I have a great job and now I have a great this, because it doesn't work that way.
I love that because I think that's one of the core things that disasters teach us, right? Is that it's a short ride from the penthouse to the outhouse. We see it all the time when people can be really sort of sorted in life, if you like, with the home, with the nice cars, with the great job, with their family, and then you can lose all of that overnight.
Right. No, I think you both have this experience. You meet refugees who have had amazing professional lives, and you go through the experiment of, what would I do if I moved in a tiny little backpack to a country where I don't speak the language. And I think I would do what the refugees do that I know, which is try to invest in the next generation, because usually like your life is just holding on. And it's a very traumatic experience. I mean, the whole history of Eastern Europe is from the 30s, where everybody did not think the world would collapse. Everybody who was middle class thought everything was going to be fine. And then it wasn't. And you have, country after country where people face this situation instantly. And that's been one of the sort of foundational intellectual interests of me. People did not know. And you see it every day. It can be a natural disaster. It can be armed conflict. It can be anything. And none of us is assured that we can manage and control those outcomes.
When I'm listening to you, I'm just thinking about how much grief is involved. And in this work, we become, in a way, the holders or the processors of that grief. And how have you experienced that or managed that in your career?
We generally, in the profession, which I don't like that word, we go home and then we have a safe space and hopefully people who love us. And I've been just blessed to have a wonderful partner who's always supported me. I can't imagine if you don't have a group of friends around you who are your safety net. I think it would be extremely hard. But I think that grief is real. And what I think about a lot, and what some of my experiences in East Europe have taught me, my own family, it's like moving to the US story was full of a lot of grief and trauma that nobody talked about. The US, we always think we have like this melting pot, but any generation who leaves has left huge problems behind them, huge problems with them. And I feel lucky that I've been able to learn more about that and even hold on to it, hold on to the difficult stories my great-grandparents and grandparents went through as a way to, remember for people experiencing it today, a way of thinking there's some kind of balance in the universe, that their challenges maybe, part of what I get to do now is due to what they suffered. I mean, there's no equations, but knowing that we all have things behind us that got us where we are, and we need to honor them and be aware and understand that, again, life is never an escalator. There are a lot of people who have sacrificed a lot.
Yeah. On a previous episode, Dr. Lucy Easthope talked about how she felt like she was a rememberer of a particular type of sorrow. And I thought that, yes, that's so beautiful. And I think, too, that role of remembering is part of what we do now and how we use that to support others, teach others.
For me, it's so interesting that I spent a lot of time studying Eastern Europe, and now we have this war where it's relevant. And I never thought I would use it that way, or that it would be relevant or helpful.
Isn't it amazing in life when things come full circle and really make sense? It really makes sense where you are right now.
Well, and it was one of those when full-scale invasion took place in 2022, I just said, I have to go. I mean, I have to be there. This is why I'm here. Language skills, there are a lot of things that are needed that we didn't have in the Red Cross or Crescent movement. So it was almost no question on my part.
And what a powerful thing to know instantly, this is why I'm here.
I've had the opportunity to meet a lot of local charities and nonprofits, and I just have to shout out one called the Gdansk Foundation for Social Innovation, because they did something I've never seen before. They're a social service charity that started working with refugees, and they just did normal things in their very local community of distributions and classes and integrating people. I went to one of their distributions and I was speechless, because behind the table where people were giving out the stuff, the power dynamics of the person giving out and the person receiving, not only was everybody behind the table like joyous and lovely and nobody felt any power dynamics, there were people with different abilities behind the table. I have never seen that before. And this is so central to the Gdansk Foundation that that's how they operate in everything. And I thought, oh my gosh, how simple to make sure all kinds of people in your community that you are serving were giving out the stuff. And they had thought of it on their own. Whether other people do it already, I don't know. I still can't believe how lovely that was to see put into practice. And it shouldn't be that hard. It's a small thing.
And small things can be so powerful, and we'll totally put a shout out to them in the show notes. That's beautiful. But when you mention the power dynamics, I think that is one of the most difficult things to navigate, whether that's power dynamics with the big P politics, or whether that's power dynamics within a community, or whether it's power dynamics when it comes to gender. How have you figured out power dynamics in the years that you've been dealing with it?
Yeah, no, I think you're calling it out. I mean, I've felt extremely uncomfortable working for the world's biggest superpower U.S. government. And I also didn't truly like working for one of the biggest Red Crosses, American Red Cross, because you walk into the room and people treat you a certain way. And I remember going to a very small national society when I was with American Red Cross, and they're like, tell us everything we need to know. And I was like, are you kidding? There's so many things we do badly. That's all I said. I'm like, I really need to know what you're doing well. And I really need to listen to you, because, our computer system, I'm like, no. And I just can't do it any other way, because I know that the size of your organization has nothing to do with your ability to solve great problems. I mean, this Gdansk Foundation is like a neighborhood foundation in Gdansk. And this society I'm thinking of is quite small. They all have amazing things. And it's just that, just not letting people, when people ask you, tell us all your knowledge, I think you have to flip it around very quickly. I'll tell you all the things I'm bad at, you can tell me what you're good at and let's both learn.
And I love that focus on strengths. Yeah, it's so easy right now, actually, to really look at everything that might be wrong or broken or that we're not doing well, and to flip that on its head and actually say, well, what are our strengths and how do we build on them, I think is just so powerful.
And I've had the opportunity here to be that mirror, working with a lot of the Red Crosses that are smaller, Moldova, Romania, Hungary. They would say to me, well, we're not good at anything. I'm like, well, that's not true. And then we just talk and listen. I'm like, wow, I haven't ever heard of anyone doing this. And I've never heard of anyone doing that. And you got what campaign going for 2,000 euros? And then when they hear it reflected back, and we put on a meeting where the whole point was all of them presenting their successes, the things they were good at. There was no higher ups, there was no American Red Cross, there was no headquarters. It was, you all are going to present to each other and have your peers clap for you and really see that you're good at so many things. And I mean, it shouldn't have to be that I would help facilitate a meeting like that, but that's where they were. And hopefully more people will be able to see themselves that way. Of course, they're all doing many, many wonderful things. It's just they don't have the mirror, they don't have the time to reflect on it, and they don't have an audience to give them that positive feedback, the lighting up in the eyes when they say something and they get to see other people get really excited about what they're doing.
This idea of being a mirror for other people's successes. Oh, I'm so taking that one away, Carrie. Oh, what a banger of a point to end on.
I love that you have this setting where we can share more interesting ideas and that you've got the cheeky name Disastrous. That's the opposite of your armor. You're like, look at all the things I'm bad at.
I know, I would say my career has been a series of disasters, and that my mum would say that she's a mother of all disasters. Gotta keep it cheeky, eh?
Yeah, and there's a real kernel of truth we've been talking about over this podcast that really can help disarm and help everybody contribute and make a difference.
Hey, you made it to the end. Thanks for listening. A little reminder, if you enjoyed this podcast, please help us out and subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite platform. Even better, share it with someone in your network who might find it interesting. This podcast is produced by Disastrous. You can find out more at disastrous.co and join our newsletter for resources and content from this episode. Join us next time for another Disrupting Disasters.